Bonjour, bonsoir, dear friend JCB Live. This is a magical day today in the heart of Napa Valley. We're with a magical man who transforms grapes into hops. You all know GC, Jesus Christ, my ancestor of course, had a lot of power. Converted water into wine, and a lot of other things got converted into that magic resurrectional product. Nile, Zacherle himself, is one of the best winemaker and brewmaster that Napa Valley has ever seen. I cannot tell you how we say in America it takes a lot of beers to make great wines, because all the winemakers during harvest love to drink wonderful beers. He's made the best beer company there is in Northern California, Mad Fritz Company, that he co-founded. He makes wine as well at David Arthur, which is a great winery. And he is an amazing, passionate, what we call in French, a terroiriste. The terroiriste of barley, of hops, and all the ingredients that makes fabulous beer as well. And guess what? He was so kind to make a beer for the Oakville Grocery, this fantastic IPA. Dear friends, this is harvest time. We are in Napa, and we are with Nile himself. Bonjour.
Bonjour, yeah.
Wie geht's?
Merci.
Hey, I don't know what language we should speak, because the beer world is a little German too, isn't it?
Yeah, certainly. In a lot of the beers we make are certainly, they're a blend of many different origins. So Germany, English, Belgian, and, obviously Americans, we've always been twisting up these kind of perspectives over the years and having fun with them.
Hey, we having fun, dear friends. So when we don't talk about Grand Reserve, Proprietor's Blend, superior qualities of beer, you talk to Nile. So Nile, as we tasting,
yes.
Well, we should look at each other in the eye.
Yeah.
I smell and the bouquet of the hops. Had the feeling to be in the warm fields of California.
Yeah. So this is these are hops that we source from you at your Jameson Ranch.
That's right.
And they're a blend of, I believe, as I understand it, Cascade, Chinook, maybe a little Mount Hood.
That's right.
There might have been one other. Do you recall?
Those are the three.
Okay. And so they were harvested all at once. There certainly the aromatic attributes in this are kind of their pininess. There's some citrus elements. It's very bright, very floral, and it's dry hopped. So that means after the beer is aged in barrel, and prior to packaging or bottling, we put fresh hops into the beer for a number of weeks.
Yeah.
And that's the dry hopping, kind of like a tea bag sort of scenario. So that's where you get this super bright, punchy nose.
Unbelievable, dear friends. And as you could see, we say on the back label, locally grown.
Incroyable.
Jameson, incroyable.
Yeah.
So Nile, as we're going to go into beer and wine.
Yeah.
Why beer? So what happened to you?
Okay, so it all began many years ago. I would like to say that I probably never, or we would have never really started Mad Fritz had I not been a winemaker. As a young fermentationist in my 18, 19 years, I started making beer. Eventually that led me to UC Davis, where I studied beer and winemaking. I eventually did brew professionally at Anderson Valley Brewing Company, but then went off to make wine around the world, Bordeaux, Australia, and then came back here. And so as a professional winemaker, like you said, it takes a lot of beer to make good wine. So over the years, I'd be like, prior to harvest, I'd always be making beer.
Yeah.
And we'd go to the brew pubs and things around here and you'd be like, the beer's good, but it's not great. Why is the beer better over in Sonoma? Why is it better over here? Why doesn't Napa Valley have a really good beer? So finally, I think it was 2012, 2013, we decided, we're going to do something. We'll do it very small, and let's look at it a little differently.
Yes.
Let's look at it with a winemaker's lens. Let's look at the ingredients over recipe and process. I mean, we certainly have a Mad Fritz process with the barrel aging, natural carbonation, and kind of listing the origin of ingredients. Yet that's really what wine is. When we talk about wine, we talk about your wine or my wine or anyone's wine. We say, well, where was it grown?
That's right.
Where are those grapes from? What's the variety?
Sense
What's
of
the
place.
climate like? What kind of soils do you have? And that, I mean, that's the most wonderful thing about wine, is that a translation of place to the finished product, it isn't as obscured by process. And that's actually one of the biggest problems with beer, is that there's the grain growing, and then the malting of the grain, and then obviously the hop growing, where it's pretty direct. But then you have the brewing process, which is really cooking.
Yeah. But there's a lot of artistry to it.
There is, and just like cooking, you know, that kind of seeing things in the process, and winemaking's like that too. We have the kind of the vintage occurring right now as we speak, and you do make decisions along the way that are intuitive, based on experience. Sometimes I feel like every vintage is like, well, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just kind of, you know, let's see, you're drawing on your experience.
It's often the case, right?
And, yeah, your intuition.
But the results are sometimes better than we think if we knew what we were doing.
Well, actually, one of the interesting things about Mad Fritz, and then really driving at sourcing the beers and being like, okay, hands off, is letting go. And so I think that has a lot to do with making really good products, is getting your skills together, learning how to really craft a product, and then learning how to let go. And so that's a really interesting journey. And that, after being a winemaker for 20 plus years, you know, there's a certain, you hold on to your, let's say, your approach, but you really need to let go as you get older and more experienced.
Is it what you do as a great father? Because I know you have, how many kids now?
2 kids. Now,
only 2, no more?
Yeah, no more. Well, the third kid's named Brewery, because Madeline, Fritz, and then Brewery. It really is the third child running a small brewery.
And do you let go with your children?
As much as I can. As much as I can, certainly. Probably a little differently than my wife. I mean, we come from different perspectives, which is great.
And how different?
I'm
asking a big question. All of you are wondering, where are we going?
Well,
she's watching.
Yeah, she might be. So she grew up in the Fisher family. That's her family, and she grew up on the Sonoma side of Spring Mountain at Fisher Vineyards, which was planted in the 70s. So I don't know, you might call like the second tranche or the new wave of Napa Sonoma wineries during that phase, Joel and Fred. And so she grew up there when obviously Sonoma, Santa Rosa, Napa, it was just a different world, really.
Yeah.
And it's quite a bit more busy now. So she grew up there. Her mother started a school called Sonoma Country Day School, and then she went there. Then she went off to boarding school. She went to Princeton. I'm kind of the public high school kid that was a sponsored skateboarder in high school, and, you know, just kind of didn't really have a lot of guidance.
You're going to give us a demo soon.
Yeah.
Are you still
next
skateboarding?
time we'll do the skate park, and then we'll have the wines and the tasting there. How about that? We'll get you on a skateboard. Let's get you on.
I love skateboarding. I love surfing.
Yeah, surfing.
So, you know, when you love surfing and skateboarding comes with it.
Oh, yeah.
It's a little different feel and energy and so forth, but it's still the same rush. I love it.
Yeah. Well, the wonderful thing about, the true difference is there's definitely a right left brain. A bit. I'm not as good at surfing as I am at skateboarding, but I'd say that, you know, when you're on a surfboard and you're surfing the waves, your knowledge of and your comfort in the water and being able to read the waves and read the tides and the currents and knowing how to, like, what's coming when. And it's you do build such an intuitive sort of sense and kind of knowledge, where skateboarding, everything's kind of set in place. It's not moving. It's all you and just the conditions in which, you know, you...
Interesting perspective on life, too.
Yeah.
As the earth rotates.
Yeah, we are moving right now.
So you moving to come back to beer.
Yeah, so in 12, we really started working on it.
Very cool.
13, 14, we launched the brand, and we really wanted to make beer using more of the winemaker's lens, so authenticity of origin. And then we didn't want to be in any stores. We wanted to be in restaurants. We knew what we were going to do was going to cost too much money to just be on a shelf. Yeah. And that's really what the herd is doing, right? Hey, let's just behave more like a winery. So we literally behave more like a high-end winery. Our beers, 60 to 70% of our beers are sold before we make it in futures through a membership program that allows us to really pay more money for our ingredients.
For sure.
Resource, you know, land that you have, or neighbors, Long Meadow Ranch, Fisher, just to name a few. We've planted barley, different grains here in the valley. So hopefully making pasta later on this year.
Oh, we ready. So let's taste another one, because we'll finish with the wine, I assume.
Yeah, we can do
Let's
that.
do a few more beers so you could tell us about Mad Fritz and what makes the terroir so unique of Napa Valley, and how we can really become, as we call in this new wave of garagistes, terroiristes in the world of wine, how terroir really impacts the ingredients.
Yes.
Because they do, you think there's only grapes, but hops is a magical element. And think of hops from Egyptian time to today. Egypt, Mesopotamia, Greece, Rome, obviously the northern part of Europe as well, the Vikings, and all the world has been brewing beer almost older than wine when we think about it.
And it's interesting when you step back in time and you look at some of these historically made beers. I mean, they didn't really have that many hops.
That's it.
And they used whatever they could. And I mean, it's pretty amazing. We just brewed a couple of historical beers. One's called a Coit and one's called a Liège. And they're really driven by the ingredients. Again, what you use, what you have. So the Coit is malted oats. And the Liège is malted spelt. So another historical grain.
For sure.
Yeah.
Those are all historical varieties.
Yes.
We've talked about grains like kamut for pizza or pasta, or the old historical Egyptian grain, which is one of the most healthy in the world. Similar in beers. There's so many varieties, like so many different style of Chardonnay, Cabernet, and so on. So
different clones,
which one shall we open next?
I think you laid it out perfect. I would go with this one here.
Let you be the master. So look at this gorgeous package. How did you're telling such a story with those presentations?
So I thought of the name Mad Fritz after our children, Madeline and Fritz. And then my wife, we were reading the La Fontaine interpretations of Aesop's Fables to our kids that were younger. And it was, my wife thought, why don't we name these beers after Aesop's Fables? And I go, that's brilliant. Now don't tell anybody. Of course, there are other people. I think there's a winery that does it, and it's all public domain. And of course, I thought I could do the artwork myself. Well, I was mistaken not only with time and skill, but came across this gentleman, Francis Barlow, from the 17th century. So 1687, he did a book of fables.
Yeah.
And then I tried to get that book, but I did acquire the second printing, which was 1713 of the printing. Wow. So it's a pretty cool book. I should have brought it in, actually. Yeah. That would have been cool. So that's what's on the front label here. Most of our beers are named after Aesop's Fables. So this one's called The Rooster and the Partridge, and then the fable is written on the back label with the moral and kind of in bold. And so
what's the moral of this one?
This one is it's about a farmer that purchases a partridge, brings him home, puts him in the pen with the roosters, and the roosters are constantly fighting. They're kind of fighting with the partridge, and the partridge is like, what's the deal? Do you guys always fight? And then he finally realized, well, there's no point battling against these roosters. Like, this is just their personality. So kind of accepting people for their personalities versus kind of trying to be like, well, you really should be like this, or being, like, well, you should be more like me. No, you should be who you are. That's who they are. If those roosters are going to fight, that's how it is. So kind of accepting people as they are.
Good philosophy.
Yeah. And there's a lot of that kind of eye for an eye stuff in the Aesop's Fables.
Yeah. And the drawings are, the illustration is absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
I've always loved your package, and you decided to go with the porcelain finish.
Yes. So what that does is allows us to pour a couple bottles. So you could close that one up, this bottle here, right? We put it back in the fridge. You come back later on this afternoon or tomorrow. It's in the fridge. And you drink the rest of it, or 3 to 4 days later. Boom, it's good to go.
It won't happen because they will all be finished tonight. I can tell you that. We're having a beer fest.
Woo!
Hey, there's nothing more fun than beer, isn't it?
It is. And, after making beer, I'd like to say that nothing tastes better than a glass of wine. So we could kind of spin that little saying around. It takes a lot of good wine to make great beer.
The tough part is maybe a glass of champagne after beer.
Oh, yeah.
That's maybe the hardest I can typically envision. Beer and champagne. Beer and red wine, beer and white wine or rosé.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it works very well as a combination. Mm-hmm. Beer and champagne, I'm not sure. What do you think?
I guess I need to try that more. I'm kind of a, persnickety about my champagne, and I like my Blanc de Blancs, and I guess fresher's better, but also the late disgorges are quite nice. And it really depends on producers and the story.
What you have and
So
we're tasting in our wonderful passion glass, our champagne glass, and look at the beautiful head. So now it would be fun for you to describe to our friends, because this is the best beer there is, and we really begged Nile originally to help us, and then you realize it's fun to collaborate and to know one another, specifically with the oldest continuous operated store in the history of the West Coast, Oakville Grocery. So we called it Oakville Brewing, and this is actually one of my favorite, the Hefeweizen.
Yes.
So tell us about this and how we should try it.
So this beer, actually 50% of the grain that was used in this beer is a white Sonoran soft wheat that was grown in Calistoga. So 50% of this beer was grown right here. The other 50% is malted barley from Siskiyou County up in California. So it's a California grown beer. The hops came from Sonoma. So it's a kind of a non-traditional hop cascade used in this. Although, look, if you want a classic Hefeweizen, just go to the store. But this is the American kind of twist it around. Take a classic style. Don't add citrus to it. You don't need to. It's got Cascade hops. And it's got that Bavarian wheat yeast in it. So you have some spice. You have those aromatic phenols. You have that floral kind of piney notes, citrusy on the nose. The natural carbonation gives you this nice, fine, silky, see that? Just how that...
and barrel aged.
And barrel aged, So that was about a month and a half in barrel,
So what kind of barrels do you use?
So the first time we brewed this, it was pretty exciting. We got a couple punch-ins from Hudson Vineyards, and they were used for Chardonnay. And we put this Hefeweizen in a Chardonnay, a used Chardonnay punch-in for 3 months. A Hefeweizen, 5% alcohol beer, 3 months. It came out, it was so beautiful. Before you carbonate some of these beers, they're very vinous. They're very wine-like. And then you carbonate it and the other dimension comes out.
Sure.
That little bit of acidity.
And how do you carbonate? Explain the process, because there's so many ways to do it.
Yes. Well, it is. I like to use many of the French terminologies to describe the processes, because
I think so good today.
I think they describe.
Finally, we contributed to something.
Yes. Well, many things. Tirage is the word I use, but some people say bottle conditioned or priming sugar. But when you're making champagne, or sparkling wine, you would have a tirage. So the tirage is a certain amount of sugar that you would add to your base wine and to carbonate it, and then it would sit for a period of time. And usually that's the tirage time, right? And then it gets disgorged and then packaged and released. For beer, typically there's the tirage or the priming, and then it takes about 2 to 3 weeks to carbonate. Some beers will take longer, but typically 2 weeks, and then it's ready. So 6 grams per liter, roughly. So just a little bit of sugar, a little bit more yeast. We mix it up, and then we package it.
And what kind of sugar do you add?
We add dextrose, so corn sugar. So
very important, your dosage.
Exactly. And so, we could certainly use different things. We could use honey. We could use cane sugar. Really, the world it's up to you.
Yes.
I've consistently used corn sugar. I'm looking to maybe modify that in the future. But currently, that's just been kind of what we've done, for better or for worse.
And where do you see the beer world in many ways going? Because we've gone through ups and downs, and obviously now a different focus in terms of what people drink. So what's your view of the beer world and taste profile evolution?
If you were to look at the wine world, we see these kind of trends that go up and down, but they're longer spread. They're kind of like just think of like buttery oaky Chardonnay. Like it's not going away, but it's not really the cat's meow. But it's still a volume niche, within the category of, let's say, Chardonnay. Right. So if you kind of analogous kind of story would be like IPA. So now we have these hazy, less bitter IPAs that are more aromatic, more tropical, more juicy, as they call it. It's a category. There are a number of other categories of IPA that literally they're just peaks and troughs, and then they come back again. just as, buttery oaky Chardonnay will come back again. So our racy, more Chablis style Chardonnays will too. So in general, I think some of the beer world has finally come around to some of our philosophies right away, where we're going to differentiate a product based on the ingredients, not on our brand, not on the label, not on the recipe or the process. Because really, at the end of the day, if you're just recipe and process, anybody can do what you're doing because you're using commodity ingredients.
Yes.
So now, when we started in 2014, there was only one craft maltster. And that having a craft maltster, really what it does is it breaks this commodity chain. And now I'm working with you, who's growing grain and malting it.
That's
and
right.
I have a direct link with a place in the product. It may be imperfect, but it has your signature, your site, your place. And that's really what differentiated our product right away. Was, well, it doesn't taste like other people's beer because we really are using these other grains.
That's right.
And then you synergize that with yeast and some of the process, like the barrel aging, natural carbonation. Now you have a layering effect of complexities that weren't there and that isn't in a store-bought, bottle of beer. I mean, that's great if you want to get your Haagen-Dazs vanilla ice cream and your 6-pack of Pilsner or IPA, whatever.
Yeah.
That's always going to be around. But many breweries, or should I say, and many breweries are moving in the direction of sourcing more craft malt, paying more for the raw materials, looking at local ingredients.
I'm going to say.
Finally. It's like I want to throttle some of these breweries that literally they're in these states where there is a really big farming community.
Yeah.
All you got to do is reach out to your local farmer and say, hey, what are you growing down there? Any way we can get some of that in our beer? And so that, I think there's been a little bit more farm to table brewing.
Great.
That's kind of, it's been going in that direction. And in fact, we have done a single origin Napa beer. So who's done, had single origin coffee, chocolate, you name it, right? We did that with beer. So we have a Napa ale. We've also done a Sonoma ale. So single county, we call them,
So how do you differentiate the Napa versus the Sonoma ale?
It's all sourcing, where it was grown.
In terms of taste profile. So
Well,
you made them the same way,
Yep.
same ingredients, grown in different places. So that's a true way to judge.
Yes, certainly. Although there are so many dimensions to the ingredients and my process that kind of can get in the way.
I see.
So I can't really speak to it, too specifically. Although, again, it's a sense of place. It's like a je ne sais quoi, it's like it's this personality that the product has that, again, rather than being like, let's just break it apart into little pieces, you go, isn't it wonderful?
Yes.
And for what it is.
And which one did you like the most? Ha! The big question. Which one shall we buy?
Well, God, I mean, there was a number that we did. We did do a Mendocino one, but we didn't have everything from Mendocino, and that was from an interesting farm that was called Live Power up in, I think, Round Valley, and a biodynamic farm, and they host, they kind of run the horse plow and the whole 9 yards. And I malted that and brewed that, and that was super unique. The Sonoma was grown at Front Porch Farms so very early on, maybe 2015 it was grown. So this beer was a while ago. The Napa ones have varied depending on protein. So as the protein goes up and you malt, now you're seeing more of these Maillard reactions, some of these coloring reactions in the malting process. So again, the malting process is kind of a process in which you do get flavor. And so I saw a little bit more of that caramelization, a little bit higher proteins in our Napa grown barley. And so again, it
different
depends
styles.
on the site. Yep, different styles.
But isn't it cool to go into super premium beer like that?
Yeah. And that's it. Look, the herd is going that way. Swim the other way.
That's right. Hey, you behind me, what's happening?
Oh, yeah. Hey,
Look at that.
Talking,
This is the proof of an amazing beer. So if we try one more before we try your fabulous wine.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Because I'm so glad you brought a great variety, Nebbiolo.
Yes.
Nebbiolo from California.
I know.
Wow.
I never heard of that. Huh?
Woo! This is a dairy move. And in a Bordeaux bottle. So this is all of the above. Is different.
Yeah, well, we have a Golden Strong Ale using David Arthur water from up there. And then we also have a Marzen, and this was actually grown in Napa Valley. So Napa Valley grown barley. So I really felt like it was good. Like this beer, this is partially grown here in the valley. You know, how many breweries can you go drink their beer and literally large percentage of the beer, if not the whole thing, are grown right here in this valley. It's very unusual.
Which one is your children?
Oh gosh,
Madeline or Fritz like the most? Because they're coming of an age to drink beer now.
Well, you know, Fritz has been quite upset that you know, he has a brewery named after him, but he's still too young now to realize.
How old is he?
He's 8.5.
Well, at 8.5, you were drinking wine.
Yeah. Exactly. I was sipping on something, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well,
I know Whitney was, my wife at Fisher.
Hey, talking about your wife, let's try something
Okay, let's do, God. So the Golden Strong Ale is kind of like what I call like our Chardonnay beer.
Yeah.
It just has the Chardonnay. It's like chamomile. It has these chamomile spicy notes. This guy, the Marzen, is going to be more spicy, more malty, toffee tones.
Maybe let's try the Napa Valley one.
Yeah, let's do that.
I've never tried it, dear friends.
Okay, let's do it.
So as you unfolding this new flavor for me, how is it to work with your wife or to be a partner with your wife? Not just in raising kids and having a wonderful family.
It is amazing. She's the one that keeps me cool, if I can be. I'm a little bit. I'm a multitasker. She's a monotasker. So she's the one that I've. It's always nice to have someone that's a little bit more cool and collective than you, to get perspective.
For sure.
And she doesn't necessarily work in the brewery as much as I do. I'm pretty much day-to-day operations there, and she's at 10,000 feet.
She loves it though.
Yeah, she does, and she loves that we have just the freedom and flexibility to create. We don't allow the market or like whatever craft beer is doing. We're just like, we don't care. We're Mad Fritz. We do what we do. We have a membership that allows us to do whatever we want to do. And so we can dictate the terms on our creativity and our product. And then that means we can focus on ingredients. We can focus on our partnerships. And without being, driven by a distributor or, or a retailer or some sort of
outside forces that make you be not who you want to be.
I do.
I love this one, by the way.
I think when I think about what the brewery's become and has really stood for, it's like an art studio for beer. It's like you come in there, you have the equipment, you have the ingredients, you have your paints. Now the canvas is the style. Well, it's a Kolsch or it's a Marzen and now we're going to paint and we're just going to see what happens. And the wine is like that too, although one would hope that the terroir is going to, speak, generously.
We would hope so.
Yeah.
But it's a longer process. I mean, the satisfaction of making beer is almost immediate. I mean, how long does it take us to make a beer?
Okay, so that's a great question for this style of beer because, not only is it a lager.
Look at this color.
Yeah.
I mean, Dylan, come close to this baby.
Come close to me. So this beer, we grew the barley down at Trefethen. And then we malted it. So not only do we have to grow the barley, now we got to clean the barley, then we have to malt it. The malting process takes about a week, 8 days, but then we have to clean it after we malt it. Then we've got to brew the beer, and then it's a lager, so that means it's going to take a couple weeks to ferment because it's a cooler fermentation temperature, like a white wine. You might ferment for a month or so. And then it ages at lagers in barrel and this was maybe third or fourth use new French oak. So the impact of oak.
New French oak?
Yeah, new French oak.
Wow.
Yeah.
From where?
That was from Troyes or Terroir.
Trois, yeah.
Yeah. And there, how do you pronounce it?
Trois.
Trois?
Like the number 1, 2, 3.
Trois?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Even though it's a Y-E-S.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Huh.
The French.
Oh, no.
The mouth has to move in very different directions.
Yeah, no, I remember when I worked in Bordeaux, I had... I didn't parler français couramment, and so I went to a 1 week 40-hour French class. I remember my jaws, my whole mouth. It was just a whole other muscle.
Is it because you kissed too many lovely French girls?
I wish that had happened more often.
But it's never too late in another life.
In another life.
Do you believe in resurrection?
God, that's a good point. I don't know where we go. We kind of go into our products that we're drinking, I suppose. All our molecules become dispersed throughout this world we live in.
The beer lives forever.
All you have to do is look above you at night, and
That's true.
You feel pretty insignificant.
That's very true. What is your dream, in fact?
God, what is my dream?
Talking about looking up and the insignificance of who we are, that's a good statement. So if you had a dream besides wine, beer, Whitney.
Yeah, I mean, I think just celebrating life, feeling young, inspired, challenged, all those things. Just fullness of life.
And within that, what inspires you? How do you get inspired? Because you're a very creative mind, and at the same time, you're great in operation, which requires the discipline and the meticulous, momentum of the metronome. Which
I
is
actually think that what you're touching on is as you're going through the process, you can be inspired during the process.
Yeah.
If you love what you're doing, of course. If you don't love what you're doing, it's harder to become inspired because you're kind of beat down by this kind of journey that you're on. And so when you're on a journey that inspires you, like growing grapes and making wine and seeing this stuff happen, and it gives you ideas. Like, oh, what if we just took a bunch of, instead of doing punch downs, let's take a bunch of rocks and from the site and sink the cap and just come up with
I like the
come
idea.
up with ideas like this. And then that'll become the punch down tool, and then it'll get flavors in there. So you can kind of do this. Or I see these grapes coming in, and gosh, we have a lot of this variety. We brought in some Ribolla, and it's like, well, we have a few hundred gallons. Like, let's put some in some brand new French oak, and we know that it's not going to drive the wine.
How do you know we've tried that?
Yeah, well, you might have
with Zacherle itself.
Yeah. So I mean, you kind of go through these journeys, and you make these decisions, and that inspires the next idea. Well, that didn't work, or wow, that worked. But
so, what makes you implement an inspiration you have? Because a lot of us in this world, and we have friends from all over the world with us tonight, you have an idea, you have an inspiration, and then you say, it's complicated, or what are people going to think, or this. What makes you converting this inspiration into action?
So it's incredibly, I was talking to David Long about this, because it's like you go out there and you walk in the vineyard and you're looking at these grapes growing, or you're out in the field of barley, like we grew barley here in St. Helena, and you look at it and you go, oh God, it just doesn't look that good. And then you meet with the person in the combine, and they come and they go, wow, this isn't too bad at all. These oats will clean this up, and look, this isn't bad. And then you kind of go, oh, wow, okay, there's potential here, So sometimes it's another person's opinion, perspective, and being a little bit more open. And then what I was kind of leaning to with David, or referring to, is you look out in these vineyards, you go, God, these short shoots and these weak vines, and the stress, and we have some vineyard vines, and I'm sure you do what I call little bonsai vines, and they make an incredibly powerful wine. But at the end of the day, you're just looking at a bottle and you're pouring it in a glass, and there's a disconnect between like those vines that were there and you farm them, and like, I'm like, how do you get the consumer to realize that, like, the gravity of what is in the bottle, like, in the work that all these people put in to get it there?
Yes.
And like, so I think that's kind of maybe how I want to answer the question a little bit. Is like, being inspired is great, and having creative drive often, is critical to making a good product. Yet at the end of the day, I mean, it's really the observer that is so subjective, that they pour the wine, and the wine critic or the beer critic or whatever. In the case of wine, we have a pretty substantial system set in place with wine critics, and it's an incredibly subjective system that we all have to play. And so,
hey, talking about wine,
but
it's very true. But I admire that in you, that you've done it. You've had the idea, and you implementing it, and you keep doing it. I mean, the Marzen lager was
nice,
outstanding. The Hefeweizen was obviously incredible. And needless to say, the wine you produce, and we have another one in keg that you do, is really fabulous as well. I mean, look at this lineup, dear friends. Isn't it great? So now, for the last few minutes, we're so excited to talk about wine because this is another really wonderful winery. And you've been there for a while.
Yeah, 14 years. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So
they haven't kicked me out.
And so why do you love it so much?
They're like family. They're people. I think they realize how committed I am. I guess it's kind of I've also learned a lot from having my own business. And when you're working for a small business, you have the ability to know, well, I know what it costs to do what I do. And then when I'm working for somebody, I see what they're doing or what you're doing, I go, God, that takes a lot of tenacity. You know, and money, and people see, oh, there's all this money coming in. Well, it's going out just as fast, maybe. You know, it's like,
or sometimes faster than it comes in. The sound of perfection.
Yeah.
So ooh la la! So the winery is
David Arthur Vineyards on Pritchard Hill. Nebbiolo, 100% Nebbiolo. This is 2013.
Thank you for bringing
3 years in barrel. So neutral French or second use French oak. All Surly's aged, 30 months. Bottled, unfined, unfiltered.
Dear friends, first time I ever try a Nebbiolo on Pritchard Hill. I mean, that's the first time. And for that matter, haven't tried many Nebbiolos in California.
No.
Normally, explain a little bit about the history of Nebbiolo, because this is, for me as a Burgundian, one of the grapes in Italy we enjoy the most.
Yes.
Much more than Sangiovese or Cabernet, or the new wave of the Super Tuscans and all of that.
So Nebbiolo is considered really the king of the red grapes in Italy, and it's a very powerful wine. Yet when you look at the color, you're like, well, it doesn't look powerful to me. It looks like just like a, Pinot Noir on steroids or something. And it's like, but it is a subtle wine. It has violets. It has spice. It has pepper. It has tannin and acidity. So the textural dimension makes an incredible food wine. That's one of the reasons why it needs to barrel age for 30 months. So in 2011...
I'm amazed. 30 months is a long time, though.
Well, we learned the first year was 22 months, and it was 2011. I remember tasting with Antonio Galoni. He was at the Wine Advocate at the time, and he came up to the winery, and we were sitting there tasting. I'm like, well, I know he had his Piedmont report before he started the Wine Advocate, and then obviously Venice Media. And he was just like, he was so curious, and he kind of just brushed by the cabs and got to the barrel sample of the Nebbiolo. He's like, how did you make this? And, it was like, okay, we're on the right track. Like if he's excited, and we know we're excited, and this is like getting back to inspiration.
For sure.
Like just getting a little of that makes you go, yes, like, okay, we're on the right track. We aren't going to be Piedmonte. This is not going to be Barolo or Barbaresco, where you can kind of make these comparisons like, oh, we make these in a Burgundian style, whatever, with your Chardonnay or Pinot. This is the new world. But this site up there, it might be a little warm. We do, are challenged a little bit with the site, but, the soil comes through. The power comes through.
I feel it. This is amazing. So you explained the style. In terms of growing a Nebbiolo in Napa Valley, in Pritchard Hill, in a climate which is really not close to what we have in northern Italy.
No.
I mean, let's put it this way. Nebbiolo and Pinot Noir, adjacencies to Burgundy, frankly. And this is why all the Burgundians collect so much the northern Italian grape varieties, and Barolo specifically, because it's the same.
Yeah, I love it.
Same DNA, same history, almost the same tree in many ways. And this is a surprise for Napa Valley Sunshine. So what makes it in the soil so unique? Because there's a lot of depth here.
There's a lot of depth. And so it's obviously this kind of reddish clay, Aiken. Well, it's not Aiken, but it looks like this kaolinite clay, very rocky. You have this kind of basement rock, volcanic granodiorite that uplifted this kind of, Sonoma volcanics, this reddish soil in the mountains, a very low vigor, Yet, this is kind of a tricky vine. It has long internodes. Oftentimes it can be a little stringy and tend to have what we call kind of bowl shoots. So we've learned over the years to kind of add a little bit more bud positions, add shade cloth in warmer vintages like this year. And 13, I think we probably shade cloth that because you can see some bleaching. And like I said, the clusters start out really small. It is the first thing to bud out. It is the first thing to start veraison. It's the last one to finish veraison.
For sure.
And I'm sure you know that.
So it's the end of October?
Well, we're going to be picking this tomorrow in the case of this
I
guy.
see.
Yeah.
Okay.
But because of the season.
Yeah.
Climactically. It really is. So we're, everything's through veraison now. I mean, we're picking stuff. We've actually already brought in some Cab and Merlot and Cab Franc.
Really?
And, it's game on right now.
September 8th, game on.
I know.
So what have you not done that you wish to do? It's a big question. I mean, you've done beer, wine, children.
Yeah, people
You've satisfied
spirits,
Whitney because she's very satisfied from what I hear. I didn't send a survey yet, but it's coming. And, so life is amazing. Is there something in the beverage world or in general in life that you wish to share that you absolutely want to do?
Boy, that is a tough question.
It could be making kombucha.
Yeah, it could be making spirits and all that. People say, well, you make beer, wine. Well, when are you going to have your spirits project?
Well, which makes total sense.
Yeah.
Specifically with grain.
Yeah.
I mean, frankly, whether distillation after the first
certainly it's
stage.
like the next. Yeah, it's the next little stage. Yeah. We're not, Whitney and I aren't really into spirits. We like them, but it's not like we come home and we have a glass of wine or a beer or something like that. But we typically are kind of stick to that. I think there's a lot more for Mad Fritz to continue.
Yeah, for sure.
I think for me, looking at beer with a different lens has, allowed us to create, this product and build a base of fans. And we have a lot more to go. We have a lot more to explore and experientially, So as we evolve, my kind of goals or my destinations are, still kind of, I like to say sometimes there's things that aren't, it's hard to really know where you're going until certain things happen. And that's certainly happened more recently when we acquired a brewing system from another brewery that went out of business due to COVID. And it's really kind of changed the game for us a little bit. It's opened up different doors that I never really realized. And now we can kind of look at what we're doing and need to look at it a little bit differently too, from top down and bottom up and side to side. And so, and then just kind of building the farming community more too. And without
that, it's impossible.
Oh my God,
to get
it's
to
impossible.
This level.
And we need to, it would be wonderful to see more young people get involved with farming. And that's something that you can see. Well, here I am almost 50, and then I'm meeting new people constantly that are, growing this or doing that. But you also kind of look behind you and go, well, who's coming up behind me? Who else is thinking like this? What, where do we take... we can't just be stuck on a device or in a, kind of a, what do you call it, a pseudo world here. It's what's, this is, we need to see opportunity and it's
and inspire
from the ground up.
them as well. So it's honest
too,
as you said so well, to get them excited. I mean, if you're not excited, dear friends, by what you're seeing here, then you may want to watch a different movie. I had to say that.
We got to get some in your glass. That's part of it.
That's the part of it. So, last big question. It's been 17 months of unique time, or maybe 18, who knows? And by the end of the year, it will be 20 plus.
I know.
What's your big message to everybody watching? You've been very inspirational. Your journey is incredible. Fabulous talent, great discipline, insane precision, and I commend you for that.
Thank you.
We've been doing things together for many years now, which has been a great success, and we love it, and more importantly, we enjoy it. I mean, it's one thing to have success. It's another, often people say, I have success, but I don't like what I do. or I've done this, but so what?
Well, the definition of success is such a personal thing.
Yeah.
What one sees as success, and that's kind of like what you were asking before the previous question. Is kind of what's your goal, or what's the, and God, I mean that is could be someone's definition of success. Well, I could make a lot of money in one business because my dream is to be a vintner, or So the big message is to pursue your passion, and to pursue that passion with zeal, and obviously with your community, if you can incorporate them as much as possible and carry them along. Certainly products like this that come from a place, whether it's food or a beverage, I really feel like I'm never like inspired. So people talk about their seltzer or this or that, and I go like, why would I want to drink a fermented sugar drink with flavor additives? Like, that is just so far.
It's the antithesis of what I would want to drink as well. I mean, what's the point?
What's the point? I mean,
when we do what we do,
it's
actually hard to connect and understand.
Yeah, you're like, well, that's like the most soulless sort of. I guess it's like drinking a Coca-Cola or whatever. Yeah. I mean, look, there's a place for this, but I mean,
maybe.
But the message to others out there that want to pursue, the beverage world is one thing, but I mean, you may have other dreams or other ideas or other things, which you've got to pursue them. You got to figure out a way. And I think there's so many fun things to think about. Some of those dreams, some of those ideas can become something. And sometimes they just need to steep a little bit. Yes. And you need to cook on them a little bit, and the opportunity will come. And when it does come, sometimes it does snowball. And before you know it, it's something. And that's really rewarding.
And that's what you've done.
Yeah.
Ooh la la, dear friends, Mr. Nile himself. Behind great beers, great wine, great children, because I know they're going to be very proud of their parents. At 8.5, it's hard to imagine a brewery is named after me, but I think in a few years they're going to be very excited.
Yeah. The future is now.
And the future is now. It's the perfect conclusion to harvest.
2021. I love it. It's looking good so far.
It is.